I already talked about the frameworks that are out there, but they are all used differently depending on the nature of the project. Say Agile, for example, which is the mother of Scrum, is usually tailored around technology-related projects. Okay, but it doesn't mean that you cannot apply some of the principles on any other project. Yes, you can. That's why it's a framework. A framework provides you a guiding principle. You have to adapt it. All these frameworks you're looking at, they need to be adapted. It's not like we take a hook, line, and sinker, just do it just the way the book. That's not the way it works. You're going to meet a lot of challenges, and you're probably not going to deliver that project. A waterfall, people say all kinds of things about waterfall. I mean, I've read all kinds of things. I've had some people, that like push it out. Oh, it's the old methodology. Oh, it doesn't deliver value. It depends on what it is you're doing. Okay, it depends on what it is that you're doing, and what is most suited. And one of the things you're going to observe as you go on in your career is that every client they use different methodology. In fact, as a matter of fact, there are some clients that use what we call a customized methodology that combines both Agile, Lean, Waterfall, and Kanban. But you need to now, when you get into those kind of environment, you need to try to understand what is going on. Remember, I mentioned earlier when I started about understanding your environment, being politically and culturally aware. This is part of the things you need to find out. All right. So from all that I've talked about up to this point, you can see that much of it is really about managing your stakeholders. Managing all these different moving parts. They are not independent of themselves. It's the people that are behind them. Each process in the project management framework is managed by people, and you have to interact. You have to manage those relationships. You have to, and that's why stakeholder analysis is really, really important, which is why we've decided to deal with this one first, just to show you the importance of this and the kind of impact it has on projects. So who is a stakeholder? So it's anyone that has an interest on your project, or whoever is involved or affected by the outcome of the project. All right. And coaches, this is why it's one of the most important steps you need to take on your project. Identify who your stakeholders are. You need to identify them. You need to understand them, and you need to manage them. And overall, you have to monitor the whole process. All right. So what are the key steps in stakeholder identification process? In the inputs you need for your stakeholder identification: identify, classify, rank. Yes. Someone said review the organogram. Said review the process documentation. Okay. Understand the project context and the aim. Okay, that is also important. But that information helps you to validate their expectations and see where the alignment is. Okay, so there are a few documents you can use as inputs to identify your stakeholders. You can have the project chart if it's there already. You can have your organogram. You can have the process documentation. Let me tell you something. One of the things you're going to discover on projects is this: when you get into the client, is that every organization, now listen to this, every organization is at a different level of what we call maturity. So when you're coming in as a project manager, your experience from another client might be totally, in fact, usually is totally different from another client that you're getting into, because both organizations might be at different levels of maturity. There's some companies that don't even have any process documented anywhere. They know what they're doing, but it's all in their head. There are some organizations where nobody takes any decision except the boss, the first of all, bounce it off the boss. In the organogram, it doesn't say that, but in actual, day-to-day work that they do, that's what you see. And this is why those observations is really, becoming politically and culturally aware is really important. So you use these documents as input, and then you use a stakeholder analysis spreadsheet sometimes to do your documentation in terms of getting who they are, their contact details, where they are, what team process that they lead, who their subordinates are, what kind of communication communication mode do they prefer. And then at the end of the day, you have your stakeholder register or your stakeholder map, okay? And then in that same document, you have the strategy on how you're going to engage them, which I just talked about them briefly right now. One of the tools that we use is what we call the power matrix. Now, it's a matrix that looks at the interest and the influence level of each of the stakeholders you identified. If you look at my screen on that should be my right side, you will look at this power matrix. When you've done the analysis and you put all the people you've identified in the column where they belong, depending on what you found out, all of them that are within the quadrangle of high influence and high interest, those are the people you need to pay more attention to. The people that fall to my right, where you have the high influence and low interest, are the people that you need to keep satisfied, right? And then the people, of course, at the bottom who have high interest but minimal influence are the people, they probably don't make the decisions, all right? But they do need to be informed to carry them along, all right? So stakeholders mapping is what helps us to identify this group or individuals and to focus our attention on them and develop the right strategy to, to engage them. Let's take a quick look at what the typical process is. There's another template I'm going to show you, but I just want to walk through this quickly, and then I'm going to show you what a standard template looks like. Now, again, remember, these templates we share with you doesn't mean that that's what the client will use. It's just to give you an idea of all the key elements that you must have at the minimum on your stakeholder analysis document, all right? So the deliverable stakeholder analysis is usually owned by the project manager. That is his job. The information source is usually from the project charter, the sponsor, the owner. Sometimes it's your client counterpart staff that will give, or sometimes you get to a project, you already have a change manager on ground. While as a project manager, you do on the size of this client and also the level of the business maturity, they sometimes will have a change manager on their own side to manage the change that is about, they manage the impact of the project on the whole organization. So you might, sometimes you may have a change manager as one of your stakeholders, all right? Okay, another place, like some of you already mentioned, is the organogram, okay? And how do we get some of this information? Sometimes there's meetings, sometimes it's interviews, sometimes it's document, all right? And what are we trying to capture with all that meetings, interviews? What we're trying to capture is we're trying to get the contact details of these key people. We want to find out what role they play in the organization, but we also want to find out whether they need to be involved on the project. If they've been assigned to be on the project, we want to know. So we want to also understand what their expectations are, or what would you probably call interest requirements. Because don't be surprised. Sometimes when you talk to some of these stakeholders, their interest is a little bit, it's something more they're looking for that is not in your project charter or the project definition itself. And that already introduces what we call a scope creep for you. So you need to pay attention. It's not at that point that you start trying to deal with scope creep, but it's for information you need to digest and know that this is a risk. I need to be able to manage it. And then, of course, you come up with your parametrics. And then, of course, by the time you gather sufficient information in terms of what their level of interest is, what their level of influence is, how powerful are they in this organization, then it would give you an idea of the kind of impact, whether they are a threat to you, great support for you. You need to be able to determine that. So when you're trying to do your stakeholder analysis, these key elements are really important. because that's what will help you to develop your parametrics and your RACI. RACI stands for who is responsible, accountable, to be consulted and informed. All right. And the other thing I wanted to mention about is that what a lot of people always miss and they run into trouble later, we forget the unions. We say, oh, somebody else is going to handle the union. No, 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 no. Sometimes these guys provide you a lot of insight in terms of how the organization is really working and what the real problem is, you know? So you need to take note of that. And then, of course, the communication mode and the frequency of that communication. A lot of people don't like emails. They want a face-to-face conversation. Some people don't want a face-to-face conversation. They want you to send them a text, or give them a phone call, send them a text, give them a phone call. Some people want all of that. So you need to be able to find out what works for each of the stakeholder, the individual or the group. And then you obviously come up with a communication plan. And finally, you need to be able to know, understand that this plan you have, this analysis you've done, and this communication plan you have need to be approved by the business. They need to agree with it, that this is what works for them. All right. And of course, you need someone to get that signed up. You need to be able to identify who actually signs up for what. All right. So in the stakeholder analysis elicitation exercise, first you on your regular template, you will have the stakeholder name, you have the contact person, whether it's an email or address, how much does the project impact them, and you can't just decide that on the fly. You need to talk to them. You need to, first of all, look at what the objective of the project is. We'll look at what the project is trying to achieve. And then through conversations and discussion, you figure out who and what is being impacted. And then you need to find out what level of influence that they have on the project. Can they make decisions? Without them, can you move to the next phase of the project? Then of course, you need to decide what's important to the stakeholder, okay? And also, another thing about managing stakeholder is you need to give them opportunity to shine. In managing your project, it's not about you shining. Remember, it's not about you showcasing yourself. We always fall into that trap. I want to show that that is important also. But some of the people you are working with, you're probably your project sponsor or your project owner, you're probably more experienced than them when it comes to projects and doing things like this. Don't take the shine off them. These are people's stuff, I'm telling you. Otherwise, those people can ruin your project. So every opportunity for them to be on the spotlight, like shine, give it to them. Even if it's a presentation you would have normally made, give them an opportunity to contribute and recognize them. But also you need to understand the risk that some of these stakeholders may pose to you and start looking at the risk management aspect of it. All right. I'm going to show is just a sample of what a communication plan will look like after you've done the stakeholder analysis. Now, in this particular slide, you will see that there's an individual called Ben Aston. He's the VP of communication, and he wants communication at every milestone. He wants it at the format he wants it is high level. He wants to see how the burn down rate on the budget, and he wants it to be sent by email. So, and he doesn't want to review documents. He just wants to see the final approved files. So this gives you an idea of this person's personality. And trust me, in every organization, you're going to have people with, they are not going to have the same personality. So these are the things you need to deal with. And this stakeholder analysis helps you basically to identify, understand, and manage these people or this group of people. If you fail to do this, you're going to struggle on your project.